if we, the people, don't know what our rights are, they're not going to tell us.
If Americans just learned that the IRS was actually knowingly deceiving them, that would be enough for them to rise up and put a stop to it.
This small booklet includes the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. This is a document that every citizen should read. It's a document which freed an entire nation. This is the Internal Revenue Code, and this document, and the unlawful application of this document by the Internal Revenue Service has enslaved the nation that this document attempted to free.
Hi, this message is for Aaron Russo. This is Anthony Burke at the Internal Revenue Service. Let me suggest some people that you might want to think about talking to. One would be Don Alexander, who's a former commissioner who's here in town in Washington. Another would be Sheldon Cohen, who is both a former commissioner and former chief counsel. All those guys, I think, can answer your question about, where in the tax law it says that you have to pay taxes.
Wow, good news, I thought. So I called Sheldon Cohen because he used to be the IRS commissioner. He wrote the tax code, and he was also general counsel to the IRS. He is a true expert, and I couldn't find a better person to answer my questions. He graciously agreed to my interview. The reason I'm doing this documentary is because there are many people in America today who believe that there's no law that requires them to pay an income tax or file a 1040. And there are many people going to jail for it, fighting over it.
The Internal Revenue Code is authorized by the 16th Amendment.
I think it should be clarified. I think government should be transparent to the people. Why doesn't the IRS commissioner sit down with them and just explain it in clear English? Why?
I don't think they really care. I think they're just playing word games.
You don't think they're sincere people?
No, I don't think they're sincere people.
What does voluntary compliance mean? And why does the IRS code say it's voluntary to comply, not mandatory?
That's a word euphemism we use. We use voluntary compliance when we talk about traffic signals. Most people at 2 o'clock in the morning, do you stop at a red light?
Yeah.
Is there a cop there?
Well, sometimes I don't.
Well, I do, and most of us do. Most of us do.
Right.
But that's voluntary compliance.
That was a complete perversion of logic. Traffic laws state that it is mandatory to stop at a red light. The IRS code says it's voluntary to comply. Mandatory and voluntary are the complete opposite of each other. Yet he wants us to believe that they mean the same thing. So can the government criminally prosecute somebody of information put on their 1040?
Yes.
Right, so doesn't that violate the Fifth Amendment?
No.
But the Fifth Amendment says I don't have to do anything that incriminates myself.
Well, it doesn't incriminate you to put your income down.
But you said before I could be put in jail for it. The commissioner wants us to believe that although the IRS demands that you fill out the 1040 and you can go to jail for it, that they are not violating your Fifth Amendment rights of self-incrimination. That is absurd. Isn't it true that the word income is not defined anywhere in the Internal Revenue Code?
The law says that the government has a right to tax income from any source derived.
So, but the word income is not defined in the code. It just says income without a definition
That's right.
of what income is.
That's right.
Correct?
Yeah.
But there are many different kinds of taxes. Well, how can an American citizen know what income is if the code doesn't define it? If they're paying an income
Because
tax...
the courts have all defined it.
Do you remember what constitutional attorney Edwin Vieira said?
The definition of income in the Constitution was given in the Eisner versus Macomber case, and it turns on gains or profits that are made from some activity.
So the Supreme Court has ruled income is not wages, it's not labor, it's gain from corporate activity. I believe that a man's labor is his private property.
That's your view, but it's not the law.
The Supreme Court's even said your labor is your private property. When I go to work for somebody, it's a trade. It's an even exchange. I do some work, you give me some money.
In 1916, we had the Bruce-Shaber case and the Stanton case. And the Bruce-Shaber case and the Stanton case said that the 16th Amendment gave the government no new taxing power.
I'm not going to argue the niceties of that with you.
And it came up again in a case called Peck versus Lowe, where the Supreme Court said the 16th Amendment did not extend Congress's taxing power to any new or accepted subjects. In other words, if you weren't taxable before the 16th, you weren't taxable after the 16th.
Today I interviewed a juror, okay, who sat on a case, and they found the person not guilty for lack of filing, okay? And I asked her why they found him not guilty. And she said because the IRS couldn't show us the law that made him liable to file a 1040.
All they need to do, if there is a law, is to show us the law, which of course they never did,
And the reason they didn't do it was why?
because there is no law.
Title 26 requires you to file a return.
But doesn't Title 26 have to be in compliance with the Supreme Court decisions?
You're going to take a 1920 case and superimpose it on the whole Internal Revenue Code that was written after it? No, that's not.
I can't believe what I just heard. Rewind.
You're going to take a 1920 case and superimpose it on the whole Internal Revenue Code that was written after it? No, that's not.
Remember he said earlier the Internal Revenue Code was authorized by the 16th Amendment?
The Internal Revenue Code is authorized by the 16th Amendment.
Remember, the Supreme Court said the 16th Amendment did not give the government any new taxing power. These decisions have never been overturned. Let's listen further. Can the lower courts overrule the Supreme Court?
No.
How are they putting people in jail today for not paying a tax on their labor when the Supreme Court said they don't have to? Doesn't the IRS code have to be in compliance with the Supreme Court? That's my big
Aaron,
question.
this is a waste of time.
Well, let me
Because whatever I say, you're not going to believe.
He's right. I don't believe him. And neither should you. He wants us to believe we should obey the IRS code, which is being enforced in violation of the many Supreme Court decisions. If
No,
the
no,
Supreme
no,
Court made a decision...
Thank you, Aaron. I think we're finished.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cohen, you're doing that.
Well, I'm sorry that you constantly re-argue the point. You're liable because the law says that you're liable,
But
and the
doesn't-
courts say the law says you're liable,
Doesn't-
and that's why you're liable.
You see, he's talking about the lower courts, who are not in compliance with the Supreme Court, as they have to be. Doesn't the court have to be in compliance with the Supreme Court?
The Supreme Court has so held.
Where?
You caught me unprepared.
I'll come back.
Well, I don't want to do that.
But let me ask you a hypothetical question.
No. You're making silly arguments here.
Why is the Supreme Court decision a silly argument?
Well, because it's inapplicable.
That made my heart stop. He just said Supreme Court decisions do not apply to the IRS. That's the behavior you would expect from a totalitarian country, maybe China or Russia or Cuba. Not from America. They're just making up the law as they go along. Now I knew the tax honesty movement was right. The IRS thrives on intimidation and fear, not by law. It's no different than a criminal protection racket, using force to extract your money from you. Then the former IRS commissioner, now working at a prestigious Washington law firm, threatens me. Watch.
Aaron, you understand Yiddish. Cornish helfen.
For those of you who don't understand Yiddish, that means nothing will help you. Now it all became clear. I understood why the IRS wouldn't go on camera and talk about where the law was. I understood why all the senators I called refused to be interviewed. There is no law. And now you know what our political leaders and the courts have known for decades and have tried to cover up. The United States Constitution strictly forbids a direct, unapportioned tax on the wages and salaries of American citizens. The United States Supreme Court has consistently ruled that the income tax is a tax on profits and gains, not on labor and wages. On behalf of the American people, I challenge the IRS to show me a statute that allows a direct, unapportioned tax on the wages and labor of the American people. And if I'm wrong, I will give my most humble apologies to the IRS. If the IRS is wrong, and there is no law, then every person who's been jailed should be let out of jail immediately, and any assets seized should be returned to their rightful owners. If this is a nation of laws and a free country, then the IRS should show the law to the American people. I felt an overwhelming need to understand why juries were finding innocent people guilty of not filing a tax return when there was no law requiring them to do so. So I went to talk to Marcy Brooks, a juror who used her common sense and did not allow the judge to railroad the jury into a guilty verdict.
He was being tried for 4 counts of not filing his income tax.
Okay.
And our question was, well, what is to decide? Either he did or he didn't. It never occurred to us that he might actually be innocent while at the same time not filing. In the federal government, it is not a felony not to file taxes. Finally, they said, okay, if we're going to get this guy, we're going to have to put it in the state. They called up the IRS agent, Agent Craner.
Craner? Yeah. Robert Craner? Mm-hmm. This is Ken Doherty, who's also an investigator with the Illinois Department of Revenue. This is a request for a copy of the delegation of authority order. Right, and I talked to my boss about that, and he said that my badge is that. Badge is the authority. I thought it had to be in writing.
The last question that the defense asked him was, did you write any of this down? And Agent Craner looked right at him and right at us, and he said, I never wrote anything down. And yet when we saw the video, there he was, writing notes, you know. And so I'm thinking, okay, at this point, the judge is supposed to say, Agent Craner, it is clear that you have committed perjury. It wasn't even noticed. It finally came to the climax. Mr. Harrell looked right at the prosecutor, and he said, I will tell you the same thing I have told over and over again to government officials. You show me the law that requires me to file a tax return, and I'll be glad to do it.
And again, I asked, under what is the requirement that you claim and are required to do these things? And the requirement under the regulations is what section? My question to you is, what particular act are we discussing here that I am liable to do these things that you claim I'm liable to do?
Your exact question would be again? Okay, what is the section that what? But I guess I'm still not understanding your question, Mr. Harrell.
Well, you must be familiar with what that you have the police powers to enforce.
Yes.
The prosecutor absolutely ignored him. And he started slandering Mr. Harrell. Just started attacking his character.
They're calling us tax cheats, they're calling us fanatics, they're calling us weirdos. I don't care what you call me, but I have one question. Where is the law? Show me the law.
They can't let this turn into a rational debate, because if they do, they lose it. So they have to insult people and say it's frivolous.
We felt like that there was an overall arrogance and that they were railroading Mr. Harrell and wanting us to participate. Judge Coogan, he looked right at us and he said, I will instruct the jury according to the law. We were sent to deliberation. The judge promised us that he would give us the law. And we looked and we looked and it was not there. We wrote a note to the judge asking for a copy of the law. 10 minutes later, we get a note back. You have everything you need. But there was no law. And he had promised us. At that point, I felt betrayed. I felt like this man promised us the law, and that's what this whole thing is about, the law. We request it, and he still denies us the law.
And the reason they didn't do it was why?
Because there is no law. Remember, we're talking about the Illinois state law here. okay, which is a law in Illinois. So we got out that law and we read it several times, and I said, okay, wait, because they kept saying, but this is a law in Illinois. And I said, look at the beginning of it. It says, anyone required to file a federal income tax return is required to file an Illinois tax return. I said, if it is true that he's not required to file a federal return, then that nullifies the Illinois law. Two people, they kept saying, but he's going to get by with it. And I said, what is he getting by with but his rights? If there is no law, he's not breaking a law. He's just standing on his rights. Are we going to deny him that? That's when this one juror sat back and kind of rolled his eyes, and he said, you mean we don't have to pay taxes? All of a sudden we realized that this trial was much bigger, and the ramifications of this trial were going to be so broad if it actually got out. I mean, it's like we had just discovered this great government secret. And so when we came out for the delivering of the verdict, the judge was, I'm sure, even at this point, I'm sure he still thought we would give a guilty verdict. And the reason I say that is because of the look on his face when the first not guilty was read. His face just turned white. I mean, it's like, I don't believe this. The second time, you could hear people out in the audience, just in the courtroom, just going, wow, and the judge is just getting red in the face. I mean, he was just livid. And the judge got up and left. I sat there and I thought, this truly is a victory for the people. And I have never felt more patriotic. And I knew that we had done the right thing. I looked at that man, Mr. Harrell, and I thought, the system might not work all the time, but this time, for that man, it did.
In November 2004, the government arrested former IRS criminal investigator Joe Bannister. They charged him with fraud for telling the American people the truth about the income tax laws. The jury obviously agreed with Joe.
Well, it just showed Mr. Bannister to be honest and straightforward and working within the law.
Vernice Kuglin, a Federal Express pilot, claimed there was no law requiring Americans to file an income tax. She also won in court. 24 people were criminally charged by the IRS because they claimed there was no law requiring them to file an income tax return.
The fact is, neither the judge, nor the prosecutor, nor the IRS could bring that statute in there because it's not in the books. The jury came back with an acquittal for everyone.
When the matter is put to the test, which means in terms of court and enforcement action, there is a 100% success rate in shooting down these arguments.
The mafia has a code and they follow it, and it's a code of honor. But the IRS has no code of honor.
They're counting on the public not being able to face the horror of what really took place so they can carry out another, even more devastating attack and finish the job they started, enslaving America and using the country as an engine to take over the planet. The only thing that can stop them now is the American people having the courage to face the truth about 9/11 and to expose it. If we don't, they're going to continue to use problem, reaction, solution. And it's going to be sad to watch the American people after the next attack going to the very killers that carried it out, begging them to protect them. And it's sad to see the deaths of these 2,800 plus people being used to sell a police state in America. You know, Bush says the terrorists attacked us, whoever the terrorists are, because they hate our freedom. Well, then why is the government, period, whether it's George Bush or John Kerry, trying to kill our freedoms? America isn't America if we don't have these God-given freedoms. That's why this country is loved. No, now we're being forged into a tool of global empire to be launched against sovereign, innocent nations that we know had nothing to do with 9/11.
The Republicans are here and taking advantage of the 3,000 people that died right behind me for their own selfish politics, and it's very sad. I cried here for the first time today. I come here all the time. I've never cried here before. For some reason, I cried for the future because the way they're exploiting these dead people.
Because in your guts you know that the criminals are returning to the scene of the crime to gloat and to use the bloody sacrifice they committed.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So now Bush is here in the Big Apple using the deaths as an attempt to get reelected.
September 11th. September 11th, men armed with knives, armed with chemical, biological, or even nuclear weapons. The fanatics who terrorist killers, September 11th, terrorists of Al-Qaeda, terrorists, Taliban, nuclear weapons, terrorists. 9/11 terror. My fellow Americans, we have already been attacked. Terror, terrorist, evil.
September 11th, in those days after the towers fell.
September 11th. September 11th, ground zero. And suddenly the streets were full of sirens and there was fire in the sky. Terrorism, September 11th. Osama bin Laden declared war on America. September 11th, terrorists, a walking, talking weapon of mass destruction.
Barbaric terrorists, terrorists for terrorism. September 11th, September 11th. The terrorists, war and danger. September 11th, September 11th, terrorism, global terrorism, the horror. Terrorism, terrorists. Terrorists, 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 the terrorists. Terrorists, terrorist, terrorism. September 11th, global terrorism, terrorism. Terrorism. September 11th, world terrorism, terrorism. Terrorism, 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 terrorists. September 11th, threat of global terrorism, terrorism, terrorist, global terrorism, terrorism, terrorism. September 11, 2001, global terrorism. Terrorists, global terrorism, terrorism, terrorists, September 11th, terror.
Terrorism, the attack on our homeland, back from the attack on our economy, and back from the attack on our way of life. Terrorism, terrorists, hate. We must be fierce and relentless and terminate terrorism. Terrorists, you defeat them. It yearns to destroy not just the individual, but the entire international order. That's why America is safer with George W. Bush as president.
September 11th, terrorism. September 11th. Terrorism, terrorists. September 11th.
Terror, terrorist.
Terrorist.
Terror. September 11th. Threat. Tyranny. Terrorist. Tyranny. Tyranny. People hate us. Terror.
Terrorism. September the 11th. Terror, terrorist, terror, terrorist, terror. Weapons of mass destruction. September the 11th. September the 11th. Terrorists, terrorists. The evil terrorists. Terrorists. The terrorists know.
The terrorists know. The elite know we're restless, that we're catching on to their scam. That's why they're now using sound wave weapons that the military has used in Iraq on the streets of America. There's your LRAD, ladies and gentlemen, used against the Iraqis, used against the Palestinians, and now used against us in America. We're getting reports about this garden, they're already using them. Long before 9/11, they were getting the sound wave weapons, the microwave weapons ready, building all the emergency containment facilities. They knew all this was coming. How you doing, officer? Did you know I interviewed the CEO of this company a few years ago? Our boys are using these in Iraq, aren't they?
Ask all questions to DCPI, Commissioner Paul Brown.
I'm from Austin, Texas. Are those the guys in the white outfits? Right. Do you know what those are?
What?
Those are sound wave weapons they're using in Iraq. They can burst your eardrum.
Oh, it's because of
Now they're out here to review the police. What do you think of it?
I don't know anything about it. It might be necessary, but I doubt it. I think everyone knows it's a peaceful protest. So.
Yeah, I mean, well, the point is that these are things used in Iraq against enemies, and now it's being used right here in America. Now that the government in general considers the American people enemies of the state, defense contractors have a whole new lucrative market, selling high-tech weapons normally sold to the military to the police. We're on our way to a protest that's unauthorized, not permitted. have been arresting people by the thousands, and we're going to cover it. Of all the hundreds of huge protests we've seen, a small group broke off with a unpermitted march and is moving down towards Madison Square Garden, or MSG as New Yorkers call it. Now notice as we walk here that the roads have all been pinned conveniently ahead of the march. So tourists, anybody that's in here, to be arrested, and we are now inside the pins. And look at them hurting us. Look at their cars hurting us. I wonder if it'll be like Monday night. I wonder if they'll run horses and mopeds into us.
11:35. If you're here at 11:35, they will arrest you.
But I'm sorry.
They're hardly letting people out. They're opening up the pens a little inch to let people slowly trickle out. So they're set. And now we're getting in trouble for letting y'all know.
Well, that little story about how they're going to arrest people really worked. Look, everybody's leaving. Police then went in with barricades and broke the protest up into 4 different blocks and randomly arrested innocent people. It was the same story over and over and over again, and police brutality was completely out of control. Reporters for Reuters, the Associated Press, student reporters, tourists, even an American Spectator reporter was arrested and taken to Pier 57. Look around you. Prison is being built. A high-tech, cashless society control grid. We're now going to explore the ruling elite in the world today and what their driving ideology and philosophies are. We'll also look at their minions, the people that slavishly serve them. Well, here we are all the way from Austin, Texas, covering a Republican National Convention. What we're seeing here is Skull and Bones coronation number 2. Well, down here you can see the CNN staff, Bush Light. They love the president, put out all the propaganda. They also worship Kerry. So does Fox News when it comes to worshiping Bush. So here's the so-called mainstream media you can trust, which is nothing more than basically a CIA front to propagandize and manipulate the people. But it's all in a slick packaging with a great, impressive background, and that's what people respond to. You know what? I bet most of those so-called Texans down there from that Texas delegation aren't even first-generation Texans. They're just as phony as George W. Bush is. A guy who is from Kennebunkport, Maine, whose daddy speaks with a perfect Atlantic accent. People who were Tories back in the Revolutionary War. They came down carpetbagging to Texas when George was a little boy. And now so many Texans and phony Texans have been sucked in by this and just love the whole motif. But again, it's form over substance. It's the packaging. Yeah, I'm a slave. I'm happy about it. I'm proud of it. I've decided to just join the New World Order. I've decided to just go along with it and have a good time. The media has really been covering Skull and Bones lately, how Bush and Kerry are both members. Are you aware of that organization?
I am not.
Does it concern you that they both were in the same fraternity in college and just 2 years apart?
No, it does not.
Just one hell of a coincidence that 15 members each year out of 290 million people and the 2 presidential candidates are Skull and Bones.
I would say that's a coincidence. I would say that's a coincidence.
What do you think about Bush and Kerry being cousins and members of Skull and Bones?
Excuse me?
Did you know Bush and Kerry were cousins?
Kissing cousins or what?
They really are cousins.
They really are.
There's only 15 members of Skull and Bones each year out of 290 million Americans, and both of them are Skull and Bones. Certainly you're aware of that.
Oh, well, why wouldn't you be? Talk to Bill O'Reilly. He'd have that answer. I know he would.
Well, But I'm not talking to Bill O'Reilly. What do you think?
Yeah.
We need to talk about it. I mean, him and Kerry are cousins. They are members of Skull and Bones.
The question is, would he be a Skull and Bones guy today? I mean, you know, people do crazy things when they're young.
Well, his dad was a Skull and Bones, and his dad. It's in politicians' autobiographies. You know, it's in the encyclopedia. And it was called the Illuminati.
I remember reading about the Illuminati in the 60s, late 60s, when Hal Lindsey came out with a book, The Late Great Planet Earth, and everybody's going to get raptured and go to, you know, and so kids were walking around talking about that theory, and then the Illuminati book came out, or a number of them came out, and it was one world government, one world money system, one world religion.
That's all coming now.
Oh, it is.
Conspiracy theories never work. I mean, look at...
Well, every time I bring it up, somebody says, oh, you think it's a conspiracy? No, it's a real group. I want to know what you think.
We got into not a debate, but a gal who is a real confirmed Republican. She married a real liberal guy, and the next thing you know, we have her over for dinner, and I hate Bush. And I said, whoa, where'd all that come from? And she got right down to... you know, all the things of all the presidents being involved in this society, all Masons, and that was her whole base. And I hate Bush, and I said,
then how could she hate Bush? Because Kerry's a member.
Well, yeah, that's a good question.
A lot of people aren't going to know what Skull and... I don't really know what it is. I know he was a member of it. It's some secret society, and
it's so secret I can't talk about it.
Yeah. By the way, you better watch yourself. You know what I'm saying? Because if there's anything to it, you're a marked man.
You guys have a good night. Well, I'll tell you what, you're in the right place to be safe.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society. It's so secret we can't talk about it. What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go wild.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee, and look, I look forward.
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us? Not much, because it's a secret. Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code? I wish there were something secret I could manifest. 322, a secret number? There are all kinds of secrets, Tim, but one thing is not a secret. I disagree with this president's direction.
Most people don't know the Order of Skull and Bones at Yale is simply one chapter in a larger global organization known by many as the Illuminati. Its symbol is a skull and crossbones and the number 322. Skull and Bones is the name used by the uninitiated or non-members. The true name of the organization is the Order of Death or the Order of the Death's Head. George Bush and John Kerry have both been initiated in the same way. They swore an oath to the tomb, to the order of death above all others, and to wage eternal war against all of humanity. In April of 2001, ABC News was able to get a few minutes of video of a small portion of the ritual that's conducted outside in a courtyard. What they witnessed was macabre, chants of death equals death and devil equals death, accompanied by mock human sacrifices. President Taft was a prominent member of Skull and Bones, and in 1900, he became the first president to visit Bohemian Grove in Northern California, a satellite of Skull and Bones. For 3 generations, the Bushes have been members of Skull and Bones, and for 3 generations, they've traveled to Northern California and the Bohemian Grove. There are many prominent foreigners, like German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt. Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon are pictured here in 1957 at the Bohemian Grove. Both men wrote about the organization in their public memoirs. Schwarzenegger is a reported visitor to the Bohemian Grove, as well as former President Jimmy Carter. While in New York, we ran into the Karl Rove of 4 administrations. David Gergen, top presidential advisor to Ford, Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, and Bill Clinton. We couldn't believe our luck. It just so happens that David Gergen is also a prominent member of the Bohemian Grove, the offshoot of Skull and Bones. This insider of insiders, a staple of the White House for 22 years, got very upset when we brought up Bohemian Grove to him. He didn't deny its existence. He didn't deny that he was a member. He didn't deny the rituals. He just became angry and didn't act very gentlemanly.
The real wild card here are the demonstrators. We just don't know where this is going to go. While they were peaceful today, there's a lot more anger among those demonstrators than is evident. You talk to them today, they're pretty angry people. So that's the big wild card.
Hey, Mr. Gergen, can we talk to you for a second?
Where are you from?
I'm Alex Jones. I have a TV show in Austin. I make documentaries. Just a few questions about the convention.
Yeah, well, is there a camera or are you?
Yeah, right there, just about. Yeah, but I just want to get your permission first. Here.
Okay, it's local. I've got.
No, I understand. Just about a minute or two.
Okay, great.
We're talking to David Gergen, and he has advised several presidents, and of course has written quite a few books, and is I would call you a political pundit or researcher.
Commentariat, over the hill, whatever.
Okay. How long have you been in New York?
About 4 hours.
What do you think of this circus?
Well, I haven't seen all the protests yet, but I've never seen as much security for a convention as we have here. And it's, the city's almost closed down. I think it's remarkable. I think it's an unfortunate turn for politics that we have to have this many police around.
There's been a lot of news articles and reports saying that there's a heightened risk of terror attacks. Do you think that's? Do you think there's a chance of that, or comments?
Well, listen, they just arrested, I think, or broken up some plot allegedly to somebody wanted to blow up subways. Yeah, I think it's a very real danger. And you've got Madison Square Garden is sitting right, basically on top of a train station, and Boston Convention was right on top of a train station. Yeah, I just have to remember that trains are very accessible, vulnerable, and that's what happened in Spain. They went after trains and they blew some trains up, and it wasn't very expensive. So I think there's that danger, but I think the police are on top of it. They're treating this as a special security event, which means there's not only the obvious police around, but believe me, there's a lot of private stuff going on here.
Okay, one last question. I read a Washington Times article many years ago where you had a comment about the organization, and then now it's been in the Wall Street Journal, it's been in a lot of different newspapers, and that's the Bohemian Grove. And back in, 1996, when you joined as a Clinton advisor, the Republicans were criticizing you. Oh, what about Bohemian Grove? And then you countered them by saying, "Hey, I don't run around in the woods naked." What did that mean? Here is the before-mentioned Washington Times article where he said, "I didn't run around naked like they do."
I don't know what quote you're referring to. I'm not aware of any quote like that. Listen, I am a happy member of the Bohemian Grove. I like the folks who come there, and it's really inappropriate for me to talk about the group beyond that. Thank you.
Have you been there for the ceremony with the cremation of care?
Frankly, I don't think that's something I need to talk to you about.
Great owl of Bohemia, we thank thee for thy adjuration.
Have you been there for the ceremony with the cremation of care?
Frankly, I don't think that's something I need to talk to you about.
Really?
That's right.
Well, I'm Alex Jones, and I snuck in there in 2000. I'm the guy that blew it wide open and got the video. It's been on national TV.
Well, I just respect you for that.
You do?
I do.
But it's a lot of big public officials going in there. Don't we deserve to know?
I don't know anything about you, and I don't know anything about your film. But if you go in there with an understanding, you violated that understanding by releasing that film, and I don't respect you for that.
Really? But we have public officials.
I'm sorry. You took an understanding when you went in there that you would not do that film. And did you have an understanding when you went in there?
No.
Did you crash it?
Yes.
Yeah, and it has no trespassing signs there too, doesn't it?
No, they put them up after.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just walked in.
I'm sorry, sir. I've been there before. I know what the circumstances are, and I'm sorry you violated the understandings. That was not a gentlemanly thing to do.
But what about the ritual? Is the ritual gentlemanly?
Sir, everything. I don't owe you this comment.
I know. I appreciate it.
This is what's called ambush journalism, and I disrespect you for that as well. So thank you
ever
and goodbye.
Been in the ritual?
It's none of your damn business.
Oh,
that's right. Listen. You go around and make understandings with people and violate them. You ambush people on the streets, and that's inappropriate form of journalism. If you wish to practice that, that's fine, but don't ask others to respect you for it. If you want to, you can do. You're a free American, like anything you want. If you want to be uncivil and rude and ungentlemanly, that's up to you. But don't expect the rest of us to say, "Oh, well, you're
there,
one."
Mr. Gergen.
I'm sorry, nobody sets policy in there. We try to be gentlemen, and obviously, you don't belong there.
Weaving spiders come out here. Yeah, that is a three-pointer. Woo! Boy, I hit the hot button. Mr. Gergen, have a wonderful life. Say hi to Moloch for me, Canaanite deity, and I'll see you at Eyes Wide Shut, baby. Bye-bye. Get his face, get his face, get his face. Get his face, get in there and get his face. David Gergen. David Gergen says that we're angry?
The real wild card here are the demonstrators. We just don't know where this is going to go. While they were peaceful today, there's a lot more anger among those demonstrators than is evident. You talk to them today, they're pretty angry people. So that's the big wild card.
Thank you, and goodbye.
Been the ritual?
It's none of your damn business. It's none of your damn business.
Oh.
That's right. Listen.
Just look at him. That's a face keeping a lot of secrets. He's got some stories to tell. And remember that Washington Times article? It talked about all the other organizations that he resigned from. It mentions the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, all of them groups dedicated to setting up a world government and destroying American sovereignty. You're looking at video that I personally shot during the cremation of care ritual held at Bohemian Grove. My documentary film, Dark Secrets Inside Bohemian Grove, details how world leaders from across the planet meet every July and actually engage in mock human sacrifices to the Canaanite deity Moloch. They bring a bound body in an effigy of a child and sacrifice it to the idol. And incredibly, most of those in attendance are our supposed Christian conservative leaders.
On the outskirts of the national capital today, black limousines with darkened windows converged on a hotel where private security guards imposed ironclad control. The limos carried royalty, political power brokers, and industrial titans to a secret meeting that will last all weekend. It's known as the Bilderberg Group. Could their objective be world domination?
We are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge, a new era.
some kind of secondary follow-up explosion.
10 o'clock Eastern Time this morning, just collapsing on itself. We have no idea what caused this.
Right now, police have to determine is whether that explosion was caused from the initial impact of the plane or whether it was something that was exploded on the ground. Generally speaking, for a building to collapse in on itself like that, it would seem to indicate that there could have been an explosion, a bomb planted on the ground that would make the building collapse within itself.
If you wish to bring anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
The Twin Towers were composed of 200,000 tons of steel, 425,000 cubic yards of concrete, 103 elevators, 43,600 windows, 60,000 tons of cooling equipment, and a 360-foot television antenna. The core of each tower was 87 by 133 feet, comprised of 47 box columns 36 by 16 inches thick. Were the Twin Towers brought down as a result of the airplanes that struck them and the fires that followed, or were they brought down in a controlled demolition? Where would people get an idea like that?
Pancake theory, according to which the fires, while not melting the steel, heated it up sufficiently to cause the floors weakened by the airplane strikes to break loose from the steel columns, and this started a chain reaction.
So you would expect then from that theory, which is the official theory, to see a whole stack of floors piled up on top of each other and then a spindle of core columns standing too.
The core of each of the Twin Towers consisted of 47 massive steel columns. If the floors had broken loose from them, these columns would have still been sticking up into the air 1,000 feet.
The plane did not cut all those core columns.
We designed the buildings to take the impact of the Boeing 707 hitting the building at any location.
The building probably could sustain multiple impacts of jetliners.
That the plane flew straight into the building.
Through him, right. Yeah.
So you're saying that the building was actually designed to cope with a hole like that and still survive?
Yeah, it was.
If you had dropped, say, a billiard ball from the top of the World Trade Center, 110 floors up there, it would have taken 8 to 10 seconds to hit the ground, encountering no resistance whatsoever.
The Twin Towers came down in nearly free fall speed. 200,000 tons of steel shatters and explodes outwards over 500 feet.
This means that floors shattered at an average rate of about 10 floors per second.
There is no scenario for a pancake effect of buildings falling that allows them to fall at the rate of free fall.
Now what can do that? What can move mass out of the way? Explosives.
Heard the noise associated with an implosion.
Secondary explosion on Tower 2.
Some sort of explosive device.
We're obviously having a bit of trouble right now maintaining our location because we just heard one more explosion.
There was another major explosion.
Do you know anything about those extra explosions we heard?
No, I do not.
Were they car bombs?
I have no idea, ma'am.
The string shook, and I heard like an explosion.
Do you know if it was an explosion or if it was a building collapse? To me, it sounded like an explosion. We heard a very loud blast, an explosion. They were taking photographs and securing this area just prior to that huge explosion that we all heard and felt. Not clear now is why this explosion took place. When there was some sort of collapse or explosion,
from street level, as though it had exploded up, a giant rolling ball of flame, and the firefighters screamed, "Run!"
There was this blast of warm air. It wasn't hot. It was warm. And it picked me up and threw me up against the wall of the building.
You were picked up off the ground.
Physically picked up off the ground.
I remember an explosion. At that point, I got knocked out. I don't remember anything. Then I got up, and I looked out the window because the windows exploded, and the street below caved in. And at that point, there was like fireballs coming up.
An hour later than that, we had that big explosion from much, much lower. I don't know what on earth caused that.
About 15 minutes after they made their entry, we heard a boom,
I don't know if that was the infrastructure that was going or another explosion.
Again, there has been a second explosion.
John, just seconds ago there was a huge explosion, and it appears right now the second World Trade Tower has just collapsed.
All of a sudden I heard rumbling, and we all started running away from it. The glass blew out and threw me onto the sidewalk, and I couldn't see for 20 seconds.
It was like holy hell coming down them stairs. And then when we finally got to the bottom, they were coming out on the mezzanine level there, and then another explosion came right from it, just everyone flying.
We stuck on the stairs for a while. We finally got down to the lobby. Then we get to the lobby, it was this big explosion.
So I was real lucky. I don't know what happened to the people behind me when that blast occurred.
And was actually on the 78th floor of the second tower, and was evacuating the tower, and experienced all these explosions and made his way back down.
We presume because of the initial explosion, there may have been secondary explosions as well that were detonated in the building by these terrorists.
There was a secondary explosion, probably a device either planted before or on the aircraft that did not explode until an hour later.
I heard a second explosion and another rumble and more smoke and more dust. I ran inside the buildings, the chandeliers shook, and again, black smoke filled the air. Within another 5 minutes, we were covered again with more silt and more dust. And then a fire marshal came in and said we had to leave because if there was a third explosion, this building might not last.
Eyewitnesses also reported that explosions had taken place in lower levels of both the North and South Tower.
They were having coffee in the World Trade Center when the first plane struck.
And all of a sudden it sounded like, I don't know where the subway is, but it sounded like a subway collision, a bomb, and it was just pounding, boom, 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 and I literally thought the subway had exploded. And
the ladies that are with me were in the World Trade Center in the first building and escaped through the lobby where they report they believe there was a bomb in the lobby.
Just get out of the tunnel and the blue.
The subway tunnel?
Yeah.
Yes, I was right there. I was down in the basement, came down, all of a sudden the elevator blew up, smoke. I dragged the guy out, his skin was hanging off, and I dragged him out, and I helped him out to the ambulance.
And when I got up to the concourse level, it was just like gunfire and then just 3 big explosions.
And even the turnstile was burnt and was sticking up, and they just told us to run.
I heard the first explosion, and the elevator blew up.
And as we were coming out, we passed the lobby. There was no lobby. So I believe the bomb hit the lobby first, and a couple of seconds then the first plane hit.
Our office was on the B1 level. As I was talking to a supervisor at 8:46, and all of a sudden we hear, boom! An explosion so hard that pushed us upwards. And it came from the basement between the B2 level and the B3 level. And when I went to verbalize, we hear, boom! The impact of the plane on the top.
As I'm walking by the main freight corridor building in the corridor, that's when I got blown. I mean, the impact of the explosion threw me to the floor, and that's when everything started happening. All of a sudden, a big impact happened again, and all the ceiling tile was falling down, the light fixtures were falling. You know, you got to go clear across the whole from 1 to 2 World Trade Center. And then all of a sudden, it happened all over again. Something else hit us to the floor. Right in the basement, you felt it. Walls were caving in, everything that was going on. I mean, I know of people that got killed in the basement. I know of people that got broken legs in the basement. People that got reconstructive surgery because the walls hit them in the face.
On 9/11, New York City lost 343 firefighters at the World Trade Center. Since they were the ones inside the towers before and as they collapsed, I'd say they've got a pretty good grasp on what happened. So what does the FDNY think?
I went around by the freight elevator and I could see it was just blown. It was just a giant shit. 30th floor. We hear another explosion. And at that time, we heard a huge explosion.
Firefighter Louis Caccioli told People Weekly, "I was taking firefighters up in the elevator to the 24th floor to get in position to evacuate workers. On the last trip up, a bomb went off. We think there were bombs set in the building." For more than a year, the Port Authority blocked the release of a tape of firefighters' transmissions from the World Trade Center on 9/11. In November 2002, the tape was finally released to the New York Times and other news outlets. Why did it take so long to get the tape released?
I got an eyewitness
We just had another explosion. Warren Street because of the secondary explosion. We've got numerous people covered with dust from the secondary explosion. And we got another explosion on the tower, 1013. Tower 2 has had a major explosion and what appears to be a complete collapse surrounding the entire area. Who's involved in the secondary explosion at Tower 1K? I've got 5.
It was like crossing the war zone. There was nobody there. Where the fuck? What do we do? We made it outside. We made it about a block.
We made it at least two blocks, and we started running. Floor by floor, instead of popping out.
It was if they had detonated. If they were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
All the way down. I was watching it and running.
One eyewitness was standing among a crowd of people on Church Street, 2.5 blocks from the South Tower, when he saw a number of brief light sources being emitted from inside the building between floors 10 and 15. He saw about 6 of these flashes, accompanied by a crackling sound before the tower collapsed.
You heard a big explosion before the building fell?
I saw it as it was happening, and it sounded as if you had 100 of those little black cat firecrackers and you lit them all off at once. That's what it sounded like. It sounded like the finale of the 4th of July over the East River.
Yeah, here's one of the guys who can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something? You gotta get back. You know that. You gotta get back. All right?
The 4-1 should have taken a couple of companies that they were leaving back to us that were stuck on the tunnel.
What does science have to say about the collapses? The collapse of the World Trade Center was picked up by Columbia University's observatory in Palisades, New York. The South Tower registered as a 2.1 earthquake. The North Tower registered as a 2.3 earthquake. Won Young Kim told Chris Bolin that their seismographs pick up underground explosions from a quarry 20 miles away. These blasts are caused by 80,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate and cause local earthquakes between magnitude 1 and 2. The 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center did not even register because it was not coupled to the ground. During the collapse, most of the energy of the falling debris was absorbed by the towers and the neighboring structures, converting them into rubble and dust or causing other damage, but not causing significant ground shaking.
47 huge steel columns going up the core. They're interconnected. How do you get them to fail simultaneously so the core disappeared? It looks like those core columns were cut.
The way we do this is by cutting the beam at an angle.
And our conclusion is that the building should not have fallen that rapidly if indeed fire caused the collapse. And in fact, there's one mechanical engineer, Gordon Ross, in the Journal of 911 Studies, who's done a thorough analysis based on conservation of momentum.
If the official story was correct, then the heating that was supposed to cause the failure would have been a much slower event, and it would have been an asymmetric event. For the tower to collapse straight down onto itself flies in the face of what we know about steel and how steel behaves. When we have a failure in one area, then the failures tend to continue within that area, and you see an asymmetric collapse, possibly the upper section falling off as it twisting away from the tower and falling off. But it's very unusual to see the upper section falling straight through the path of the greatest resistance, which was straight down through the middle of the tower. It just does not add up.
Steel beams, weighing up to 200,000 pounds, were thrown laterally, up to 500 feet. A cross-section from the World Trade Center, weighing approximately 300 tons, was embedded in the southeastern corner of the American Express building. This piece would have had to travel at least 390 feet, maintaining enough kinetic energy to embed itself in the corner of the building.
What we should have seen in the debris pile was a pyramidal shape. If it had been a gravity-driven collapse, we would have seen a roughly pyramidal shape or a conic shape. What we actually did see was a massive ejection of dust and debris and large sections of steel from well away from the towers, tens of meters away from the towers. That's hard to see a reason for that within a gravity-driven collapse.
Do you still think the jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center? In all the videos of the collapses, explosions can be seen bursting from the building 20 to 30 stories below the demolition wave. Here, 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 and here. Etienne Sauret was filming her documentary, World Trade Center, the first 24 hours, and caught both collapses on tape. Watch carefully. The tripod shakes 12 seconds before the North Tower begins collapsing. And something is knocked off the right-hand side of the building. You're probably asking, if there were bombs in the building, how would they get in there without anyone noticing? Ben Fountain, a financial analyst who worked in the World Trade Center, told People magazine that in the weeks before 9/11, there were a number of unannounced and unusual drills where sections of both the Twin Towers and Building 7 were evacuated for security reasons. Daria Cord, a guard in the North Tower, told Newsday that security detail was working 12-hour shifts for 2 weeks before 9/11, but on Thursday the 6th, bomb-sniffing dogs were abruptly removed from the building. So who authorized all this? President Bush's brother, Marvin, was board of directors at Securicom from 1993 until fiscal year 2000. Securicom, now known as Stratasec, is an electronic security company backed by Kuwait American Corporation, which provided security for United Airlines, Dulles International Airport, and from the early 1990s up to the day of 9/11, the World Trade Center. Marvin is also the former director at HCC Insurance Holdings, which insured parts of the World Trade Center on 9/11. More information on this was supposed to be disclosed and never was. To date, the SEC has not revealed what they have learned. If only we could examine the debris from the World Trade Center and figure out what happened. Unfortunately, Mayor Giuliani began shipping the remains off to recycling yards overseas before investigators could even examine it. Not even FEMA was allowed into Ground Zero. Essentially, they blocked off a crime scene and destroyed all the evidence.
Since the inception of the Federal Reserve in 1913, a number of large and small wars have commenced. The three most pronounced were World War I, World War II, and Vietnam. World War I. In 1914, European wars broke out centered around England and Germany. The American public wanted nothing to do with the war. In turn, President Woodrow Wilson publicly declared neutrality. However, under the surface, the U.S. administration was looking for any excuse it could find to enter it. In a noted observation by Secretary of State William Jennings, the large banking interests were deeply interested in the World War because of the wide opportunities for large profits. It's important to understand that the most lucrative thing that can happen for the international bankers is war, for it forces the country to borrow even more money from the Federal Reserve Bank at interest. Woodrow Wilson's top advisor and mentor was Colonel Edward House, a man with intimate connections with the international bankers who wanted in the war. In a documented conversation between Colonel House, Wilson's advisor, and Sir Edward Grey, the Foreign Secretary of England, regarding how to get America into the war, Grey inquired, "What will Americans do if Germans sink an ocean liner with American passengers on board?" House responded, "I believe that a flame of indignation would sweep the United States, and that by itself would be sufficient to carry us into war." So, on May 7, 1915, on essentially the suggestion of Sir Edward Grey, a ship called the Lusitania was deliberately sent into German-controlled waters, where German military vessels were known to be. And, as expected, German U-boats torpedoed the ship, exploding stored ammunition, killing 1,200 people. To further understand the deliberate nature of this setup, the German embassy actually put advertisements in the New York Times telling people that if they boarded the Lusitania, they did so at their own risk, as such a ship sailing from America to England through the war zone would be liable to destruction. In turn, and as anticipated, the sinking of the Lusitania caused a wave of anger among the American population, and America entered the war a short time after. The First World War caused 323,000 American deaths. J.D. Rockefeller made $200 million off of it. Not to mention the war cost about $30 billion for America, most of which was borrowed from the Federal Reserve Bank at interest, furthering the profits of the international bankers. World War II. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked the American fleet at Pearl Harbor, triggering our entry into that war. President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared the attack was a day that will live in infamy. A day of infamy indeed, but not because of the alleged surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. After 60 years of surfacing information, it is clear that not only was the attack on Pearl Harbor known weeks in advance, it was outright wanted and provoked. Roosevelt, whose family had been New York bankers since the 18th century, whose uncle Frederick was on the original Federal Reserve Board, was very sympathetic to the interests of the international bankers, and the interest was to enter the war, as we've seen, nothing is more profitable for international bankers than war. In a journal entry by Roosevelt's Secretary of War Henry Stimson, dated November 25, 1941, he documented a conversation he had with Roosevelt. The question was, how should we maneuver them into firing the first shot? It was desirable to make sure the Japanese be the ones to do this, so that there should remain no doubt as to who were the aggressors. In the months leading up to the attack on Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt had done almost everything in his power to anger the Japanese, showing a posture of aggression. He halted all of Japan's imports of American petroleum. He froze all the Japanese assets in the United States. He made public loans to nationalist China and supplied military aid to the British, both enemies of Japan in the war, which, by the way, is completely in violation of international war rules. And on December 4th, 3 days before the attack, Australian intelligence told Roosevelt about a Japanese task force moving towards Pearl Harbor. Roosevelt ignored it. So, as hoped and allowed, on December 7th, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, killing 2,400 soldiers. Before Pearl Harbor, 83% of the American public wanted nothing to do with the war. After Pearl Harbor, 1 million men volunteered for the war. It is important to note, Nazi Germany's war effort was largely supported by two organizations, one of which was called IG Farben. IG Farben produced 84% of Germany's explosives, and even the Zyklon B used in the concentration camps to kill millions. One of the unspoken partners of IG Farben was J.D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company in America. In fact, the German Air Force could not operate without a special additive patented by Rockefeller's Standard Oil. The drastic bombing of London by Nazi Germany, for example, was made possible by a $20 million sale of fuel to IG Farben by the Rockefeller Standard Oil Company. This is just one small point on the topic of how American business funded both sides of World War II. One other treasonous organization worth mentioning is the Union Banking Corporation of New York City. Not only did it finance numerous aspects of Hitler's rise to power, along with actual materials during the war, it was also a Nazi money laundering bank, which was eventually exposed for having millions of dollars of Nazi money in its vaults. The Union Banking Corporation of New York was eventually seized for violations of the Trading with the Enemy Act. Guess who the director and vice president of the Union Bank was? Prescott Bush. our current president's grandfather, and of course our former president's father. Keep that in mind when considering the moral and political dispositions of the Bush family. Vietnam. The United States' official declaration of war on North Vietnam in 1964 came after an alleged incident involving 2 U.S. destroyers being attacked by North Vietnamese PT boats in the Gulf of Tonkin. This was known as the Gulf of Tonkin incident. This single situation was the catalytic pretext for massive troop deployment and full-fledged warfare. One problem, however, the attack on the U.S. destroyers by Vietnamese PT boats never happened. It was a completely staged event to have an excuse to enter the war. Former Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara stated years later that the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a mistake, while many other insiders and officers have come forward, relaying that it was a contrived farce, a complete lie. Once in the war, it was business as usual. In October 1966, President Lyndon Johnson lifted trading restrictions on the Soviet bloc, knowing full well that the Soviets were providing upwards of 80% of North Vietnam's war supplies. Consequently, Rockefeller interests financed factories in the Soviet Union, which the Soviets used to manufacture military equipment and send it to North Vietnam. However, the funding of both sides of this conflict was only one side of the coin. In 1985, Vietnam's rules of engagement were declassified. This detailed what American troops were and were not allowed to do in the war. It included absurdities like North Vietnamese anti-aircraft missile systems could not be bombed until they were known to be fully operational. No enemy could be pursued once they crossed the border of Laos or Cambodia. And most revealing of all, the most critical strategic targets were not allowed to be attacked unless initiated by high military officials. Apart from these imposed ludicrous limitations, North Vietnam was informed of these restrictions and therefore could base entire strategies around the limitations of the American forces. This is why the war went on so long. And the bottom line is this: the Vietnam War was never meant to be won, just sustained. This war for profit resulted in 58,000 American deaths and 3 million dead Vietnamese. So, where are we now? September 11th was the jumpstart for what is now an accelerated agenda by the ruthless elite. It was a staged war pretext no different than the sinking of the Lusitania, the provoking of Pearl Harbor, and the Gulf of Tonkin lie. In fact, if 9/11 wasn't a planned war pretext, it would be an exception to the rule. It has been used to launch 2 unprovoked illegal wars, one against Iraq and one against Afghanistan. However, 9/11 was a pretext for another war as well, the war against you. The Patriot Act, Homeland Security, the Military Tribunals Act, and other legislations are all completely and entirely designed to destroy your civil liberties and limit your ability to fight back against what is coming.
September 11, 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 September 11,
September 11th.
September the 11th, September the 11th. Evil killers, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden. War and danger. Weapons of mass destruction. Terror, terror. Terror, terror, terror. Terrorism, 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 terrorism. Global terrorism, global terrorism, world terrorism, global terrorism, global terrorism, global terrorism, global terrorism, the terrorists, 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 the evil terrorists.
After you watch this, you're gonna go get your popcorn out of the microwave and talk about what I say. And you'll forget me by the end of this.
When we first started shooting Gunner Palace in Baghdad, the soldiers in the palace, all that they asked was that I tell it like it is. You know, tell the people what our life is like. You know, uncensored, unfiltered, you know, this is their day-to-day, this is their life. After we finished editing Gunner Palace, we submitted it for a rating from the MPAA. And I think about 6 weeks later, the rating came back, and it was an R. It was for language and drug use.
Let's fuck them motherfuckers up, man.
You know, these are soldiers in a war zone. Like, what do you expect? They're gonna say, oh, darn, you know, a mortar almost landed on me. This is not fiction. This is reality. These are real soldiers. They're living in a war zone. The language is not gratuitous. You know, we're not instructing people to bleed off these obscenities. You know, this is just their life. And it's also not scripted.
Smoking weed, can't smoke in the army. Nigga trying to harm me, bomb me, don't give a fuck. Vietnam putting it down.
Joan Graves' take on this was rules are rules. And there's no way, and you're going to get a PG-13, you know, gentlemen, you're simply, you know, you're wasting our time. She also pointed out that if they did rate a film like ours, PG-13, that they would hear from pressure groups. They would start getting calls, they would start getting letters. And I found this really revealing. It didn't seem so much that it's about representing the majority opinion of America. It seems more about kind of bowing to pressure.
The worst thing that could happen, well, if you had diarrhea right now, that would probably suck pretty fucking bad.
This is the language that's spoken. Yeah, it's horrible. Yes, we may not agree with it. We might even be disgusted by it. But when the Americans liberated Buchenwald and they saw these images, you know, these heaps of people, is that PG? Is that PG-13? Is that R? People need to see that. When the little girl is running down the road in South Vietnam, you know, burnt by napalm, and she's naked. Is that PG? Is it PG-13? Is it R? I mean, you can't rate reality. And if you can't deal with it, then don't send people to war.
Put it on the camp. Those people have it. We don't. Over.
The military and the film studios have colluded for more than 50 years. Anytime filmmakers want military assets, ships or tanks or planes, they have to give the Pentagon 5 copies of their script. If there's anything in the script that's negative, the Pentagon wants them to take it out, and so they negotiate and take out any war crimes or foul language or drinking, anything that would make the military look bad. And then after the agreement is made, the military sends a minder onto the set when the film is being shot to make sure it's shot just the way they agreed. And then once the film is completed, it has to be shown to the Pentagon admirals and generals before it's shown to the public. Dozens of films have not been made because they couldn't get military assistance. So people have no idea what they're not seeing. Jack Valenti knew what was going on. He was complicit in it. He was part of it. You know, it's just a subtle form of brainwashing, I believe, that 50 years of the constant drumbeat of military is good, American soldiers are heroic and valiant, I think has made the American people more warlike over the last 50 years.
You know, I think we need to step back for a second and wonder sort of what all this means, that 2 or 3 companies completely control the information in our country. And when we think about censorship, what's being censored are scenes in movies, which mean nothing to these people. And of course, what's not being regulated is the ways in which these corporations control the flow of information in the recording industry, in the film industry, TV industry, radio, press, everything.
And by the time it's completed, you know, and we have 3, maybe 2 companies that essentially own access to our culture, it'll be impossible to break up because the political power of those companies will be so massive, and they will be willing to spend extraordinary amounts to protect their cartel position, that no government will be strong enough to stand up to them.
I want to pay particular gratitude to the members of Congress who are here today. It pleases me greatly that you've come, and it pleases me even more that you come from both sides of the aisle. I was struck with Ted Stevens. I've never heard that before, but I'd like to claim that, Ted, when you said he He has friends on both sides of the aisle, but he doesn't know about an aisle. I like that.
America is a great country. We annihilate our enemies. Would you please get that dog out of here? There are homosexuals here in New York. You're liable to think that's a gerbil on steroids. Let's be more sensitive. Where's PETA when you really need him?
If those people are going to be in heaven back there, if those people are the ones who have armaments on their poster and everything, if they're going to be in heaven, I'm ready to go to hell.
The globalists have been systematically engaging in a massive brainwashing campaign, telling the public that torture is a good idea. And now we've seen the aftermath of torture. The Joseph Mengele-style abuses include killing detainees and harvesting their organs. But they don't just torture people to death. They do things so horrible we can't even mention them here. And there's no mystery when it comes to finding out who ordered all of this ultra-brutal torture at Camp X-Ray at Guantanamo Bay and Gitmo and 32 other camps in Iraq. Alberto Gonzales and Chertoff and the rest of Bush's crew openly wrote memos detailing how torturing people unto death is an okay thing to do. It's part of the public record. The White House and Pentagon ordered the torture, but when they got caught, they just burned a few of their underlings. The Pentagon's own reports admit that 90% of those that were picked up at checkpoints in Iraq were totally innocent. But that didn't stop them from being tortured. In fact, the Army's own report admits that military dogs were used to bite and frighten detainees, that women were brutally raped, that detainees were beaten to death and sodomized with large objects dripping with battery acid. People's children were also raped in front of them to attain answers. This is the same type of mentality we see from serial killers, and it's riddled with all sorts of perverted sexual abuse. Is this what the land of the free and the home of the brave has become? After 13 years of sanctions, over 1.5 million Iraqis died, 700,000 of them children. And now thousands of private contractors have taken over the torture where the Pentagon left off, following in the footsteps of other famous control freak serial killers and torturers. The only reason the elite is selling us on torture is because they want to condition us to where we will accept its use against us. And it's been going on for decades in America, in the prisons, and against pro-life demonstrators, environmental activists, and anyone else that doesn't totally submit to their tyranny. The footage you're seeing is from the late 1980s and early 1990s, where the police openly pulled out nunchucks, started wrapping it around the arms of peaceful pro-life demonstrators and brutally breaking them, simply because they refused to get off the side of the sidewalk. The police thought it was their right to break people's arms because they didn't follow their orders.
They used nunchucks on the rescuers. This is an illegal martial arts weapon, and merely possessing one in California is a felony. To be attacked with one is assault with a deadly weapon. Never before in the history of America have nunchucks been used on non-violent protesters. This is the gruesome sight of what happened. The police, in unprovoked cruelty, wrapped the nunchucks around Michael Hausman's arm and broke it. When lawyers went to federal Judge Tashima to request he order the police to cease using them, he denied the request, saying in so many words that pro-lifers could not prove they were in any danger.
I can't tell you what it's like to be lying on the ground with police officers on a top of you, using all sorts of torture holds to make you walk. You can't walk even if you wanted to walk, and their sole intent is to torture you, and then listening to the screams of the people.
When you bring out riot sticks, it's usually because you expect to see some serious opposition, so you put on helmets and you put on face masks and you carry shields. These policemen were bareheaded.
But here it was calculated torture, and the policemen were enjoying the pain. They laughed at the people screaming, and all of us screaming, all grown men, mature men. You couldn't help but scream. What happened was when the two nightsticks squeezed on the wrists, they cut off the nerve ends and the flow of blood, and your hands swelled up to almost twice the size, and then they turned black.
It didn't matter whether you were a woman, a man, an old person. It didn't matter what your age, sex, or anything, that they were just there. They were going to brutalize everybody. And I think probably to the women more particularly, that they were very angry that they couldn't get a young woman like myself to walk. And I could tell that it was a pride issue.
This is an important illustration because it shows us how long this tyranny has been going on in this country. And if they can get away with it with one group, they can get away with it against everybody. The fact of the matter is, the establishment and its enforcers have been setting the precedent for a long time to torture women in plain view of the public, to use illegal nunchucks and break people's arms. And now in Iraq, they have these big live TV shows with all the people confessing after they've been openly tortured. And in 2005, people they take into hospitals who refuse drug tests are restrained and then tasered repeatedly until they go ahead and urinate in a cup. And there are hundreds and hundreds of examples we don't even have time to cover here. The point is, this is all macabre and terrifying, and the New World Order is conditioning us to accept it. We must resist it.
There are creatures living in outer space. And I'm the first one to realize how crazy that sounds. Scientists would immediately say, well, that's impossible. There's ultraviolet radiation in space. Without having a craft around you, you'll die. Well, all I can say is that these, I call them space serpents, they do exist. They've been filmed by Story Musgrave, who's a senior space shuttle commander. He's been with NASA for 30 years. He's seen one of these space serpents on 2 occasions. He's filmed it on 1 occasion. They've also been filmed from the ground. flying around in the upper atmosphere. Now, quite frankly, we don't know anything about the life cycle of these creatures, but they do fit in with the descriptions of other kinds of critters, other strange looking creatures that astronauts from the very early days of NASA have reported. I suspect that they use some form of photosynthesis, and I suspect that they hydrate themselves by flying in the upper atmosphere of planets. One important thing I must say though about these space serpents is that there are about 7 or 8 very, very important ancient sites, temple sites on planet Earth, most notably in Mexico. And these temples are dedicated to the memory of flying serpents. And this is what we see in this footage, is flying serpents. There also seems to be a very interesting relationship between the flying serpent and these small luminous spheres.
Control Houston, we are using the payload bay cameras right now to hopefully catch a glimpse of the Russian space station Mir as it performs an on-orbit burn. Though it will be difficult to pick Mir out from the stars as they pass behind us, the payload bay cameras are positioned such that they're looking straight back behind the orbiter, where the Mir is flying at about 850 nautical miles behind us.
Well, obviously this is a massive faux pas that this piece of footage was accidentally broadcast. The person who's passed me this piece of footage is now dead. The footage that we see, mostly of UFOs, has been filmed with image intensifying equipment.
No joy from here, Story. Hope it was a good one, though, for our friends.
Thank you, sir. We could not see it here either. We'll wait 2 or 3 more minutes till sunrise, and then at that time give you a go for KU Stowe.
We're at a mission elapsed time of 7 days, 13 hours, and 17 minutes. This is Mission Control Houston. The Mir space station is now visible on the far left-hand side of the screen, about an inch from the bottom of this particular picture. Okay, the Mir space station is the small flashing light in the center, about an inch from
Camera Charlie on a monitor.
The left-hand side of the screen. It's slowly...
Tally ho on the camera.
It is slowly moving closer to the left-hand side and is has a very light flashing to it.
We think on the middle of the screen, way to the left-hand side. We think you can see a flashing light just a little bit to the left of the center of the screen, very faint.
Yeah, we do see something flashing visually, but we're not sure that might be...
This is Mission Control Houston. Once again, we believe we were just able to spot the Mir spacecraft as it flies about 850 nautical miles behind us.
Yes, STS-80 was a very, very strange space shuttle mission. What we see is a lot of activity. It can't all be put down to natural phenomena. James Oberg at NASA and all the other pundits at NASA would love you to believe that these are all ice crystals and space junk and debris. Quite frankly, if there was that amount of debris, that sheer number of shooting stars flying around in close proximity to the space shuttle and the Mir space station, it would be not safe to put craft up into space. A piece of rock just a few millimeters across, travelling in the opposite direction of the space shuttle, would rip through the entire structure of the space shuttle and cause a fatal accident. Well, people always say to me, you know, if there's extraterrestrials and if there's UFOs, why don't they make themselves known to us publicly? Well, I think with the space shuttle mission STS-80, that's exactly what they did do. You see objects which are out of focus, or they are transparent in some kind of way. And the first one comes from behind the space shuttle, comes into the field of view, and they make their way to the upper atmosphere. That's at least what it looks like. It's joined by many others, and you get a kind of rough circular formation appearing. And then you get the piece de resistance, the last orb comes into the center of this formation, and as soon as it finds its position, it lights up. And then you can see a sort of dance of lights around this formation. Now, this suggests to me incredible intelligence. It suggests to me that they are saying, look at us, look how clever we are. And it's an astounding piece of footage. These extraterrestrial craft are attracted to thunderstorms, and many times we see lightning on the surface of the planet or in the atmosphere of planet Earth. And as soon as these electric storms start, the UFOs swarm into the area. It's almost as if they're harvesting the electromagnetic energy within the atmosphere. And in actual fact, there are unseen forces in the atmosphere, etheric flows of what the German scientist Wilhelm Reich described as orgone energy. And it could be possible that these UFOs are sucking energy from these electric thunderstorms on planet Earth, and this is where they're getting their energy from. You should concentrate on the first object that appears, and you will see that it holds its position. Many TV stations have actually broadcast this STS-80 footage, but they only show you the few seconds of the large glowing orb coming from the lower atmosphere. The cameraman who's operating the space shuttle camera is fully aware that the first object has held its position, and after the large orb has ascended from the lower atmosphere and the shuttle is moving away from the scene, the cameraman is actually zooming in at the end of the sequence to double check the position of the first luminous orb, and it's a fascinating piece of video. A few years ago there was an astounding book published. It's called The Day After Roswell, and it's written by a gentleman called Philip Corso, who's now dead. He had a military career that lasted more than 20 years, and during that time he served at the White House, and then he was a senior official at the Pentagon. And in this book, which is an astounding book, he clearly says that there is a war going on in space. In other words, NASA and the American military have designed weapons. He says in his book that some of the weapons are based on patents of the genius inventor Nikola Tesla. Philip Corso tells us that there are plasma beam weapons being used against these UFOs, and that sometimes these UFOs are hit. A special team then travel out to wherever it is in the world and collect the wreckage. Now, from the wreckage they back engineer any useful technology. In his book he clearly states that microchips, semiconductors, fiber optics, lasers, many other new metal alloys have all been back engineered from wreckage which they've collected from UFOs which have been shot down by the American government. I believe that what we're seeing with the footage from Space Shuttle mission STS-48, that we are seeing several intelligently controlled extraterrestrial craft. And yes, I do believe that the flashes are the firing of some very, very top secret weapon which is able to produce an electronic or electromagnetic plasma kind of death ray that is being used against these UFOs. I do believe that that is exactly what we're seeing.
The tether has broken. It is going away from us. Get it on the TV. TV. The tether has broken. Copy.
Space Shuttle mission STS-75, the tether incident. A lot has been said about this incident. Personally, I feel that most of the objects that you see are actual individual parts of the tether, just floating around in space, and that they're out of focus. It's a fascinating piece of footage, and I wouldn't be surprised if there weren't, quite a few UFOs coming into the scene to check out our technology, just the same as they've done many times before.
The crew can see the tether and see the satellite. It's beautiful. This view showing the satellite. Again, just moving into sunrise. 81 nautical miles now from Columbia.
You clearly hear one of the astronauts being told there's an object at your 11 o'clock position.
It's about your 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock going away. Don't worry about it.
And the other astronaut, who's obviously in the know, says don't worry about it.
Out there. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
I suspect that the senior astronauts, the astronauts who've been up more than just once, are fully aware that there is a very large number of unexplainable objects flying around.
Never mind.